All right, so what we have here is I just want to explain, so I'm going to talk about the issue of trauma, but I'm also, as we talk about locations of services and what we can do about this. For those of you who aren't aware of who I am, what I do is I work with a lot of different school districts across the state and across the nation. But what I've been highlighting, and this has come to light just in the past couple of days, is the experience that we've had relating to the fact that COVID's not over. I mean, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I hope you're aware of that. I also hope you're aware that we're getting a big snowstorm on Sunday into Monday. So just keep aware of those kinds of things. That this warm phase we have today is going to come to an end. But I want to just highlight the fact that kids are experiencing these things, and it often relates to the location and services that we're providing. And so I'm going to highlight things relating to this, but tie into this also. As a part of this, I will also want to push things that Patton is doing. And this is a recent episode, connection between trauma-informed practices in classroom management. I can't emphasize how good this is. It truly is a wonderful service. I'll make sure there's a link to this in the show notes as a part of this. This just came out about a few days ago, and there's some great stuff that you can take with to your team to share with them. It's an easy listen, and it provides wonderful information as a part of this. So we're always trying to link what's going on with Patan with what we're talking about this, and this just came up just a few days ago. So keep this in mind as we talk about this. Other things we're going to put in the notes is we put this up previously. Some of you have access to it, some of you don't. We have authored a 504 accommodations guide about how to write 504 plans, because what's really interesting about this is because as kids are coming to school with potential reasons for not wearing a mask, school districts in Pennsylvania are having to make the determination, yay or nay, this kid has a problem. Does this warrant the need of a Section 504 plan? And so one thing we have to think about is there's some kids who it comes down to a child find issue. So we're going to also put this 504 accommodations guide in the show notes for you also. Please get it out to whomever might benefit from it. It's being used by multiple states in 2 of our territories on how to write 504 plans. It's a great document. It just kind of goes into it, but it's wonderful out things like this. I'm going to highlight some things about the programming and placement as I lead towards talk about infusing trauma and our issues relating to this as we talk about this. But I just want to remember, just to remind us, if you've been a regular follower of this, and I appreciate all of those who are frequent flyers with us, is that COVID-19 still exists. COVID-19 seems like it was years ago. Remember when we started this process? Don't go back there with the pre-times, things like this. But everyone's different. Everyone is having different experiences. But what we're also dealing with is some of these school districts that have safety protocols where they have to have a certain percentage of kids, where they have a certain percentage that they're having to close the school down. That's happening in a number of schools across the Commonwealth as we speak. And we're also, in all the districts that I've talked with just in the past 2 days, we're with the number of teachers that are absent, the number of staff that are absent, the number of bus drivers that are absent, the number of cafeteria workers absent, the number of kids who are absent as a result of either testing positive or being exposed. It's just our experiences are wildly different as a part of this. So what's necessitating is this, and I truly wish we were not having this conversation, is the fact that we need to continue to pay attention to providing services for them. And this is something that is very important, and it just doesn't end. We've gotten better. We've gotten significantly better at this. Think about where we were just 19, 20 months ago as we were providing services. This was all new to us. Now we're kind of old hat at this. The hard part is we're having to shuffle. We're having to piggyback on another part. But we still, remember the thing, what we said is if we could just get the kids back in school, we would be normal. Yeah, it's not quite how it's happened. And so what we have to think about this is what we have to think about is just to remind you is that everyone's experiences are very different. People are having worlds of differences of experiences of what we have at this. Some kids are starting to get the booster. Some kids are starting to get the services, and so not quite the booster, but they're getting the 2 shots. And then but we're having teachers dealing with this, and some people are having responses to different different shots. I know there's custody battles of parents who want their kids to get boosted versus kids who don't want to get boosted, parents who don't want their kids to get boosters. So there's a lot of different issues as a result of this. And schools are having to deal with parents who are impressively getting mask mandate conversations from a variety of sources. It's truly impressive. It's been truly impressive, the mask exemptions things that we're getting as a part of this. But one thing, and this is just a reminder, those of you who don't understand who my role in society, things like this, what I do is I work with a lot of school districts when they're being sued. I was a hearing officer for many years. I just basically, this is the big tip. This is the big tip I want to keep this in mind, okay? First, be compassionate. Just truly be compassionate and aware of this. I've said this before, I can't reiterate it enough, because there's an exhaustion with this. There's an exhaustion with the fact that we're having to continue to deal with this. I mean, I go back, hark back, think of where your attitude was, or how our society's attitude was towards this last June. We had a very different attitude than we have now. And I was just talking with Dr. Smith about this. A big conference in special education, the Council for Exceptional Children Conference, starts this weekend in Orlando. And yes, I'm going, but I've promised my wife I'm going to hold my breath the entire time I'm there. And in part, I've committed to going because of the big snowstorm we're potentially getting in Pennsylvania. So that's another reason. But it's interesting about this is COVID as Omicron is rising its head, but be compassionate to people and their various experiences. Second thing, just to remind, focus on the laws. The law has not changed. We're starting to see gradual spikes of cases relating to special education litigation, and we're seeing an increase of this across the state, across the nation. I haven't testified in a due process hearing since Tuesday, so but it's interesting about this. We're seeing an increase in this and things like this. But the best thing, these last two kind of go hand in hand. I've said this before, but I feel better saying this, is just be a decent human being. Realize that everyone's dealing with pressures, everyone's dealing with this, and the teachers are dealing with pressures. The teachers are dealing with anxieties in this. And my daughter is student teaching right now. She desperately wants to teach in special education. And she wants to work with kids with autism. She's student teaching, and half of her class was not there today. So it's interesting, this process. We're all experiencing this, but be helpful. Just be that helpful person and go the extra mile, because it's going to benefit everyone as a part of this. So I can't emphasize this enough. Okay. And next one, just child find. I want to emphasize child find. So one thing that we need to pay attention to as a part of this, especially with these parents who are sending in mask exemptions, is that you're potentially on notice that there's a potential problem on this. Now, what we have to strongly consider, that's why I'm gonna make sure that you get a copy of that 504 document. And again, please disseminate to whoever might benefit from it, but pay attention to these things. Pay attention to these things, because these are potential triggers that we need to be aware of. Kid has a problem. They got a doctor's note that you are now on notice. So what I'm recommending is districts come up with a standardized policy that they need to review all of these. Standardized policy, they need to review all of the procedures as a part of this. When a parent comes in with a mask exemption, that we address this and we talk about what is going to be our role. Is the kid eligible for a 504? Do we need to issue permission to evaluate? What do we need to do as a part of this? What is the process of this? Make sure you have things like this, okay? So I'm going to shift now to talk and weave trauma as a part of this. Again, pay attention to the Patan thing that was just from the other day about this. And I got this in the old days. In the old days, I used to travel a lot. Right? But there's kids out there, and I'm kind of alluding to the issues relating to trauma, because trauma, these kids are experiencing it. If you talk about what the definition of the one thing we look at as a part of trauma is what's referred to as adverse childhood experiences. And if you look at what these kids are experiencing over the past 12 to 18 months, it's an adverse childhood experience. I can't emphasize that enough, is the fact that we need to deal with this and talk about the issues that we're talking about, addressing this and being the rock for these kids, being the consistent voice. As you've heard me say this before, I'm gonna say it again, as a person who comes from a family of educators, I am so impressed with what educators are doing to continually provide and work with kids under situations in which we probably receive very little training as a part of this. This is not what many of us signed up for, to do Zoom things. This is not what we did. Many of us didn't even know what a Zoom was or Google Hangout prior to March of a couple of years ago. I can't remember what year it was. But to keep this in mind is that we're leading a different world as a part of this, okay? But there is a resource out there. talking about this, about applying trauma to applying trauma informed framework to IEP process. This is a book that was published by LRP Publishing, things like this. It's not a very expensive book, but it will help as a part of the process. There are some individuals out there who would think that trauma should almost be a category in and of itself because of how the variability that exists and what's going on. And many of the kids with whom you're working with could all probably fall under this category. Okay, moving on, but think about this. It's in the public domain. This was just in the Huffington Post. I'm not sure how many of you go there, but it was just it spots the signs of trauma in children. But it's an interesting part of the process that we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of this. So this is something that we need to pay attention to. So when I talk about this, and this is just part of the child find obligation, what we need to think about is when you make sure that we work very closely with our general education teachers, truly work very closely with our general education teachers, because they are the ones who are often aware and they see things well before we do. They see things and they're cognizant and they're aware of where we are with this, but work really closely with them. And this is something that we need to make it easier for them to be able to report to us about how a child is doing. Because many general education teachers talk about the fact that these kids are having problems, but they don't understand the process. But this is just, I provided here, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of this, an example of a possible write-up for a general education teacher, because a lot of general education teachers don't know what they want to include when they're writing up information either for an IEP, permission to evaluate, an ER or RO. They don't understand all this stuff, and they don't understand what we're actually asking them to do. But here's just a basic statement. This is a section that is pulled from a book. It's called The Teacher's Guide to Special Education. It's just a couple-page thing. It's published by AACD, but you can see the write-up here. And just basically what the teacher wrote about a student here, about the concerns and where we are with this. But I'll make sure you get a copy of this, because you need to use the general education teachers as your front line of defense to find out who's actually having problems. Because you have a kid who's having problems, whatever that problem may be. And I'm serious, whatever the problem may be, what we need to do is figure out, is this rise to the level of the need for special education? And we're having kids we're seeing an increase in the kids being identified as eligible for special education, in part because of the issues that they're the learning loss, but also the issues because what are the issues that they're having problems just mastering the curriculum, and that they're having trouble with trauma. So there's another page on this. I'll make sure you get a copy of this so you can share with this. But I want to think about this and think about how to use this. So please get this out again to whomever might benefit, because it's a model that works. We've actually tried it before we put it in the book in multiple states, and just kind of give some guidance on this, right? So when we talk about trauma, and this is kind of leading towards the location of services, things like this, I want you to think about, these are some things that I'm betting you're seeing. Okay? I'm betting you're seeing because education has not been normal for these kids. Is this the new normal? I hope not. But is this something that we need to think about as a part of this? But you can see the issues that these kids are having. And this is not a pure perfect list, but these are some things that we need to pay attention to as we think about programming and placement for these things. Difficulty with memory, reduced cognitive capacity, sleep disturbance. Many of us are experiencing this of ourselves, and it's not just the fact that we're getting older. But you can see these are the things that kids are experiencing. And you can see this. So when we talk about this issue, when we address this issue, what we have to think about is what are the needs and placement programming services that we need to provide. Now, I'm not saying just because a kid has problems with trauma that meets one of these on this list here, that they necessarily need special education related services. I'm absolutely not saying this. But what you have is you basically have a red flag that's being waved in your face that you need to pay attention to. And this red flag is one that you need to address, you need to pay attention to, and then strongly consider whether special education is appropriate. Now, as many of these kids are going virtual, you're seeing kids working from home. I mean, many of us are seeing kids zooming in, or Google Hangout, whatever the format that you're using, zooming in from home while there's a TV in the background, or a dog barking, or parents interacting at the same time. And it's posing problems for these kids to be able to pay attention. So what we have to think about is giving advice about the programming, advice about where we are with this, but also constantly taking data about what we can do to improve services. Use this as some things that you can potentially see, but I'm betting you're seeing some of these, because some of these things these kids are not experiencing as normal. Okay, more. Why is trauma important? Well, think about this. Think about this. And and many of the kids with whom you work with, I bet, can fall into this category now. More likely to fail a grade, receptive language difficulties, expressive language disabilities, or seeing an increase in kids who are being suspended because they're not sure of how to actually act in schools. And then I'll talk about this. And then as we think about the standardized achievement tests, those fun things that are coming up, how to deal with this. But we're seeing more kids being referred for special education related services, and talk about this and are paying attention to this. And this is something that we need to address and pay attention to this as a part of this. Why is this important? Because these kids are part of our schools. And these are kids who we just need to be, as a compassionate human being, what we can do to be of service. Okay, more. So what I want you to do as we think about this, okay, is think differently about the students that we're working with. Truly think about this, and I mean this. Current model, what's wrong with you? New model, what happened? And a lot of us, I can tell you what happened. That they've had problems relating to COVID or Omicron, whatever the issue is, whatever the new Greek letter that we're all going to learn in the next few weeks. I hope not. But as you can see, this as this process is working through, is we need to, as we talk about programming for them, is that we need to be compassionate and realize, yes, I know that many of you are additionally providing supports, additionally providing comfort, and additionally providing accommodations to these kids. And that's what that whole 504 document that I'll make sure that you have access to is. But you have to think about what we can think about as a part of this. What can we do as a part of this instead of just immediately identifying them as having a problem, okay? So think about this. We may never know the extent of this, because I know that many of you are working with some kids. They're not showing any signs of problems, okay? They're not showing any signs of problems, while their classmates may be traumatized, okay? So what we have to think about this as we're providing programming and placement to them is the issue that what we're doing is thinking about the services and continually being there for them. So if there's one thing that I want everyone just to learn is to continually be the educator, be the professional, be the one in the room who continually reaches out to them, who continually is that rock, is the one who's providing the services, is consistent as a part of what we're doing, and make sure that we understand this. So when the best thing we can do is be there for them. And it could be short messages, it could be short video chats, it could be visits, it could be whatever, things like this. Continually reach out this, and then document the snot out of those things. Document and continue to check on what's going on and monitor how the kids are doing, and then can you report out and make sure that your general education teachers are doing the same thing and reporting that on up. But going back, we need to make sure we have a consistent mask policy as part of when a parent comes in for an exemption, what we're going to do on this. So when we keep this in mind is focus on the whole school, focus on the whole school, and focus on what the issues, pay attention to the issues. We're raising this as a part of services, because truly the districts that I've worked with, and I've worked with districts across the Commonwealth just in the past 3 days, is that the issues we need to think about is what is going on in your school. I was on the phone with the director of special education earlier today, talking about just the sheer number of kids who are being identified at Old High School, and the issues in your town. And make sure we identify behavior and ensure safety, trust, and security. But we continue to use data. We are absolutely continuing to use data as a part of this, okay? That we're continuing making determination of this. But more on this later, and probably in another section when we talk about this, that I'm a firm believer, and I am a very firm believer, that all behavior is communication. Now, these students aren't always able to articulate when they're having a problem. What they do is they withdraw. What they do is they sometimes seek additional attention. What they do is they sometimes act out. Sometimes they do all three. Now, they're not going to be able to raise their hand and say, excuse me, teacher, I'm having great difficulty with a math assignment that's been placed in front of me. I need assistance on items 4 through 7. They're going to act up because they can't articulate what's going on. So what I want you to do is continually observe the kids and pay attention to what's going on and think about what we can do to provide services as a part of this, okay? But basically, because there's some kids who are having trouble with the basics. And I mean this literally, just some of the basics in this. And yes, today in the Commonwealth, it's a slightly warmer day. Don't get used to it. It's a slightly warmer day. But I mean, the past couple of days have been cold. They've been windy. We've had ice, and yeah, we're gonna get more cold, windy, ice. It's called January, February is what it's called. But it's interesting about this is but it poses a problem, and we need to address this, and we need to pay attention to make sure the kids are getting these things. So when you see kids who are on homebound or receiving instruction in the home, and it's cold, or you see kids are having problems with the basics, food, clothing, just sleep, warmth, this is something that we need to report to others and make sure that we can provide services, and we can provide services that can be beneficial to others, so that we can help them that they can just make it through the day. That's our goal. That's our responsibility. Wait, there's more. So our teacher roles, in addition to thinking about programming, is we need to think about safety. We need to think about safety, and that's why we have these times where kids are they're quarantined for 5 days here, 6 days there, kinds of things like that. But constantly testing, and I know it's hard to get good tests now, and the backup, and in many parts of the central part of the state, in order to get there's the backup to get tests, and there's problems with some of the home tests, things like that. I'm aware of this, but we need to think about building the relationships, and building and giving the choice and autonomy about this, but continually providing the services so that kids can benefit from the education. But that's an important thing. But also realize that many of these kids have home environments that are very different from each other. And you've learned a lot about these kids' home environments. I mean, you see more of some of these kids' bedrooms than you want to see of some of these kids. And when I teach my college students, I see more posters of Justin Bieber. What is it with that little Canadian? They see more posters of Justin Bieber, or great light things about what's going on, and flags and things like this. But it's really interesting. You're learning a lot about these kids too, as a part of what we're going here. Okay. So what I want you to think about as part of programming for these kids, okay, I want you to think about, when we think about placement, make sure that first, safety is the determining word when we're thinking about placement. And when we think about services, things like this. Second is, you need to make sure that what you're providing for these kids is a level of security and nurturing, to provide supports for them so that they can continue to move forward, that they continue to feel the trust, they continue to feel the services that you're providing are ones that they can benefit from, and they're ones that they can actually improve services and help with what's going on. But keep that in mind as we talk about this. All right. So keep this in what we can do. All right. So more on this. All right. Is reduce bullying. That's easier said than done. Clear, consistent rules, daily structure. And this is for kids when they're not in your classroom, is that we continue to provide clear structures to the classroom, daily schedule, so that there's a level of consistency as a part of what we're doing for them, that we're predictable. So when you have kids who are working at home, there are regular times that we're reaching out to them, that we're consistent as a part of what the services that we're providing, and that we're documenting all of our efforts to try to help continue to move forward as a part of this. Keep this in mind, right? So relationships, all right? It's not just having conversations, all right? But it's about moving these kids forward, okay? And helping this a part of this, okay? More. So here are some responsive student-teacher behaviors as a part of this, okay? And keep this in mind. It's a broad list, things like this. Maintains consistent daily routines. Maintain structure. So if you have kids who are one place versus another, you maintain the structure so they know at 9:10 that something's going to happen. They know at 10:15 something's going to happen. Maintain a consistent structure. You will be better for it. They will be better for it. And they will appreciate this. So they know what's going on about this, okay? Tell children when something out of the ordinary is going to occur. I mean, if you're going to have to go out on break, make sure that they're aware of this. This is not news to them, that they understand where we are with this, okay? Offer children developmentally appropriate choices, kind of make sure that they understand what's going on. The hard part is, many of you have experienced that some of these kids are not developing appropriately. I mean that is that they've missed out on some of the shared experiences, some of the location experiences, some of the development experiences, and we're all having trouble on how to move this forward, things like this. Okay? Anticipate difficult periods. So many of us, think about this. We now have plans. We now have procedures when we have to go out. We have procedures and policies in place that we can provide assistance as a part of this. But what we have to think about is what we can do to anticipate these kinds of things. As I work with a lot of school board members. I work with a lot of directors of special education and superintendents. And when I talk with them, they say, pretty much, if you have to shut school down, it's not making anyone happy. And we all say if we just get kids in school, that should be our desire. That's what we're striving for. But the thing is, we have to keep this in mind as talk about this, is that we have to realize that there is going to be extra support needed at these times. So when I said back before, continually meet the kids, talk with the kids, reach out to the kids as a part of this. But you can see these basic things like this. And I don't want to go, you can read these all of your having fun reading this at home. But you have to think about this: is students manage their own feelings, appropriately nurturing and being affectionate, positive guidance and supports for all kids kind of help with this. But just goals for achievement affecting traumatic experiences, how we deal with this the rest of the class. These are important kinds of things we need to pay attention to, okay? But we're also seeing, and you also are paying attention to this, as you're seeing kids who are manipulating the system, all right? Who are manipulating the system. And I share this, and I got here, a thing like this, right? Classic New Yorker cartoon. I'm a huge fan of cartoons in New Yorker. For a while, that's the only reason I had the subscription. But it's how much do I have to eat to be eligible for dessert? You're having kids almost do the exact same thing in your schools. How much do I have to do in order to be able to participate? How much do I have to do in order to get what I need? How much do I have to do as a part of this? They're asking these questions, kinds of things like this. We have to be consistent, and we have to be constant about this, and we have to pay attention to this. So there's one major point that when you're working with the kids and you're seeking this, what I want you to think about this, and this is a different way of looking and thinking about these kids, no matter where they're being educated. Okay? And I really do mean this, and I'm not being hyperbolic on this. I've been that in the past. But what I want you to think about, when you see kids and we talk about kids, and when they say that they're attention seeking, because I live in Carlisle. I know that the Amazon warehouses, some of these parents work in these warehouses, and that the fact that these parents are working there and they're not giving enough time to their kids because they're doing their best, just trying to make the things. We're having some of these kids come to school who are desperately seeking adult attention. What we have to think about is, instead of saying it as attention seeking, talk about it as connection seeking. These kids are desperate for connections. So this is why I want to pay attention to this as we are thinking about this, as we are thinking about when we're working with these kids and these kids are going on working from home, or we're doing more remote activities, and what we can do to be connection seeking with them. Continue to foster those connections, continue to pay attention to the connections, continue to pay attention to what's going on as a part of this. Okay, pay attention to those kinds of things. Another one, I'm gonna skip down, is shift from. Then this is again a different way of thinking about this. A different way of thinking about this is, instead of just how do I get the students to behave, or how can I get the student to stop doing whatever that student might be doing, is what is causing this behavior and how can we mitigate this, or what skills does this child need to succeed? I mean, we're often disciplining these kids. We're often sending these kids off and telling them that they can't be part of what's going on. But what we need to think about is, what are the necessary skills that they require in order to be successful, and then building them towards that. And constantly thinking about these things, all right? And constantly paying attention to these things, all right? So, and I've seen me show this before, but I think it is completely apt, is that we think about this, is that not every situation is covered in the training manual. And I feel that effectively. Okay. I mean, we can talk about this, but I want you to think overarching is, be the compassionate individual, be the one who can provide the supports, be the one who's consistent with what's going on, be there with them. All right. So when I share this with you, is just keep this in mind as we talk about this, is that yes, we've touched a little bit about this. Now we're going to go into some more programmatic suggestions as a part of this. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and turn it over to Dr. Smith and see if he can get this thing to work for you. So, all right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, David. And David, if you give a thumbs up, you can see the presentation. That would be awesome.
Got it.
Great. I'm gonna go to slideshow here. Ethan has shared this with you, or will be sharing this link with you folks. For those that are returning, good to see you. For those that are new to this, faculty member at the University of Kansas, do a lot of work in this arena, have done a lot of work in this arena for years. And it's great to be here. So, these are all hyperlinks to different projects that are technology-based that I'm working on currently that are federally funded. And there's my email, more importantly, to connect with me after the fact. If I introduce something, mention something, don't give a resource to, said a little unclear, or you want to follow up, feel free to email me at any time. All right, so real quick, as Sarah introduced, Rachel, Sarah, I don't know where I came up with Rachel today. As Sarah introduced, as David reinforced, as our topic emphasizes the fact that we are dealing with, and we have been dealing with, this alternate reality, changing reality. I'm not even sure what normalcy is anymore. Wanted to represent that, of course, and that's what we're trying to continue to focus in on today. My brief reflection, folks, was right before the holiday, and I know you folks are much closer to New York. I grew up in upstate New York. I taught in upstate New York years ago. I'd never gotten to the Rockettes, and right before the holiday, first time ever, long weekend, got a chance to get to the Rockettes with my son with Down syndrome. It was an early Christmas present for him. That was on December 12th. No masks. We were all vaccinated, felt very comfortable. I was looking at the calendar yesterday saying, oh my gosh, it was only a month ago. I was in the middle of New York City, feeling very comfortable. It's amazing how things change. I don't know what February 12th is going to give me, besides, I think, the Olympics. All right. We had 3 primary questions in our abstract today, and I want to kind of use those as a reminder to guide us. And so because of time, as always, I'm going to try to keep it focused, try to keep it somewhat limited, try to reinforce some things that Patton has been reinforcing, is introducing, and have been ongoing themes that we've been talking about as well. But we know we're really planning for a variety of different things. And because of this, and it's one of the reasons I'm putting these questions up again from the abstract for this presentation today, is I want to emphasize the fact that, as many of us have already doing, is we're not necessarily planning for the face-to-face, then planning for the quarantine, then planning for the snow day, then planning for potential virtual. I mean, it'd be like the old special educator in us that knew very early on, and we were working with our general education colleagues and said, no, you're not planning for 20 typical developing students, 5 students with special needs, another student over here, another student. No, we don't plan that way. We plan for all learners. And in a way, many of us are living this, and that is, we've been planning for and rethinking for this new normal. And that is what our superheroes have been doing. And you folks have been superheroes in respect to doing this. And you've been rethinking what this typical is. And that's a key component of planning for this reality today, is having to rethink. It's having to rethink is what typical, having to replan, redesign what we're going to do instructionally. And I know we've all done this, and I know that this has been at the forefront of our minds. And I want to emphasize that, because as we are thinking of this topic today, in a way, I'm going to kind of go back to what a lot of us are doing, but kind of reinforce a couple points, okay? And so many of us have been thinking about, yes, instruction, but particularly during the pandemic, a lot of things have come to the forefront: executive functions, engagement, assessment. Folks, these are bleeding up so much so that I was just on a webinar yesterday with a group of teacher educators across the country saying, what are we doing in a very practical way at the Shippensburg State Universities, at the University of Kansas and others, to prepare our future educators for the new K-12 online, as well as face-to-face, personalized, et cetera. And these are primary areas that are popping up that have really required us to rethink, replan, redesign. And so with that in mind, of course, many of us along the way have said, wait, some of our frameworks we've been using, they're good, but maybe we need to consider other frameworks, or maybe we need to re-examine this digital learning. The spring of 2020, it was that list of 200 great websites or tools we can use. And now, of course, we're so much more mature. And instead is, how do we examine this learning that we're doing through a digital learning lens? And that doesn't mean fully online. That means we're using the technology to support what we're doing, preaching to the choir here. But with that is the other vocabulary, of course, is, well, how are we personalizing it? How are we facilitating a competency-based instruction component? And that really is what we're doing in many instances. And we may say it's individualized. We may say it's a little bit more problem-based learning. We may call it standard-based, but with priorities. But I think we're all still in the same ballpark. And the frameworks we may be using vary here, but Patton emphasized, as we have emphasized, universal design for learning as a key framework to be able to facilitate that. Something we've talked about in the past, something that you had Katie Novak do something earlier, late last year with Patton. And of course, it's something that the entire country is thinking about more and more, is a framework that really plans and designs for the variability and around barriers. And so when we think about universal design for learning, some of the things that come into play that are trying to plan for that quarantine, trying to plan for that snow day, trying to plan for some of our students are online, some of our students are face-to-face, et cetera, is that universal design for learning tries to facilitate self-regulation. Oh, you mean that engagement aspect we're trying to facilitate? Yes. It tries to facilitate executive functions. Oh, you mean those elements that we're trying to, yes. It tries to provide flexible options from the get-go. So the framework itself, when we rethink and redesign, this is a key component to think about. But in addition, things like personalized learning or competency-based instruction, also in its general planning, all right, so when we're thinking about the redesign and rethinking, it thinks about elements of the fact that, well, first of all, it's data-based. And that's what we're all about in special education, of course, is data, progress monitoring, et cetera. But why not, of course, adapt that across what we're doing instructionally, not just simply for our goals and benchmarks. I know many of us are beyond that. And yet many of our peers we're working with at times are focusing on our progress monitoring for goals and benchmarks. But let's bleed that over, bring that over to, of course, what we're doing entirely. And many of our digital solutions are allowing for that in our personalized learning, but also the individualized pathways. Sean, you're talking about special education. Of course I am. But these are elements now through a digital learning lens, we can then plan and redesign for some of these hiccups, major barriers that we're talking about in light of the pandemic. All right, of course, it also flexible learning options, et cetera. So if we think of the framework, if we think of personalized learning and things of that nature, and then we come back to these questions, several things jump to mind for me. So what I want to do is, first of all, is the fact that, well, all right, I'm thinking about self-determination for my learners. Well, how does that tie then to the digital learning, personalized learning, or UDL, Sean? Well, there's a hyperlink, folks. When you get a chance to it, here, I'll pop it up real quick to make you aware of it. There was a paper, it was a way of doing it by the National Council for Learning Disabilities. They put this out right before the pandemic. It's awesome. This is hyperlinked just to a couple ideas, but they have a whole report step-by-step in how to do it. So I'll let you guys take a look at that at your leisure. It's really good. There's also another link here that goes into personalized learning and all the ins and out elements of what that involves. So again, if you're rethinking, replanning, et cetera, and then of course there's resources on competency-based learning and a variety of other things. But if you kind of unpack elements of this, there's key ingredients. And the key ingredients are the fact that, first of all, we offer clear directions. Well, that's good special education, Sean. We offer teacher modeling. Of course, that's an effective approach for students with disability, Sean. We need to facilitate independent learning. Of course, we're trying to create independent learners, Sean. We need to provide flexible options. Well, yes, I drink the UDL Kool-Aid and it's all about flexible options. We need to address the variability and avoid the barriers. So these are key ingredients of self-determination, personalized learning. The list of things goes on that we need to be doing, and many of us are doing. And I just want to kind of expand it here as we think about some of those challenges of, again, quarantine, virtual learning, we're dealing face-to-face, but also online, et cetera. So therefore, planning and design from the get-go. So to me, a very digital example of this, okay? To be able to do elements of this, to be able to rethink the questions here, to be able to rethink and redesign personalized learning UDL, to bring this to maximum, we go with something many of us are already doing, and that is the video. Many of us have used video at a level we never have before prior to the pandemic. Many of us are asking our students to use video at a level that we didn't ask prior to the pandemic. I hope in both those cases, we're realizing, wow, video can be really effective for individuals with disabilities and also for ourselves and what we're trying to do. Many of us, of course, are being reminded about video modeling and how effective it can be. So here's a hyperlink to a variety of different resources on general ideas of ways to use video in our instruction, fully online, blended, hybrid, whatever it may be. Well, great. Okay. So when I think about video and I think about this idea that someone might be at a distance, one day face-to-face another, I think about, well, how am I going to use video then as a constant in my redesign and thinking for all my students, regardless of where they are? Well, first of all, let's go from a reading example, right? And I have some hyperlinks in here to some videos that illustrate this beyond what I'm going to say. So real quick, I'm doing station rotation. I'm doing that face-to-face. Well, in that station rotation, there's a level of independent reading. There's a level of the fact that I need to provide directions, I need to provide some modeling, but I can't be in two places at once because I'm over at my table with 5 or 6 students, and some students are doing some station work over here, other students are doing some work over here. Well, this is, to me, I have my learning management system, Seesaw, Google Classroom, and I put up a series of videos, as well as other things. We'll get to those other things, but a series of videos to be able to get into areas of, oops, I don't want to pop into there, but to get into the directions, to get into the instructions, to get into the expectations. Well, of course, if I'm not there and I'm at home, those directions, instructions, and expectations are there in my learning management system. And oh, by the way, I mentioned at the top here, the students using them, but also the parent. Right at the elementary level, I know we can't ask a lot of the parent. I appreciate that. I'm a parent myself of 4 children. As I mentioned, one with Down syndrome. Fortunately, my children are a little bit older right now, but we know prior to the pandemic and throughout the pandemic, we do need to engage family members, or at least empower family members at some level. So I'm not going off in that direction today, but whatever we create in video and we put it in our LMS for our students, of course, the family member at home, the adult member at home can help facilitate. But more importantly here, for the reading, why wouldn't we model instructions? Why wouldn't we model expectations? Why wouldn't we model reading strategies? Why wouldn't we model the way to approach a new book? Taking a look at the title, thinking about the picture, think about what that visual actually offers as a potential idea of what the book might be. Strategies we do when we're face-to-face, why wouldn't we mimic those in video to allow for the student to get that reinforcement and to allow any adult helping that child as well? Realizing, of course, we're not there, but of course, we would use that face-to-face as well. When it comes down to breaking down, reading the book, when it comes down to the students reading the book themselves, they could video record that. And then, of course, a way of us understanding where they're struggling, where they're not, levels of their fluency, how their decoding is going, many things that we're already doing. And of course, with the technology today, many of us have Chromebooks or the iPads the students are using. They automatically have the camera in it and it can automatically record. And in many instances with the learning management system, it can record and automatically post into the learning management system or record on Zoom. And then of course it saves and automatically is available for us as educators. We could also embed strategies that we want the student to use so that that strategy is available. We offer a video of that. We offer visual supports of that. We offer direction step-by-step for that. But of course, then the student has access to that to watch it, rinse and repeat, review it as much as possible. The adult in the home can as well review that, be able to incorporate that, etc. There's several people out there on YouTube doing this well. I've given you a couple of hyperlinks as I've gone along here to their videos, and they have channels and they have lots of different great ideas. And I know many of us are doing this when it comes down to reading at the primary elementary level.
Are you struggling?
Okay. In addition, of course, there's we could do this in an audio way. And we've talked about audio in the past. Here's some hyperlinks to ways teachers have used audio through podcasts and things of that nature. I'll let that lay just because of time. But in addition, at our grade level instruction, let's think about this. At our grade level or content area, so let's go upper elementary, middle, secondary. So we're going to support face-to-face instruction. We're going to provide directions. We're going to provide instructions. We're going to model. We're going to illustrate. The same thing we're going to do for reading, but we're going to do it for our other instruction. Now, of course, we're also going to make sure our instructional goals are as visual and understandable as possible. I have a hyperlink here that walks us through creating 10 steps to create goals that are very much aligned with the UDL framework, that are then comprehensible by our students, and therefore they are operational for our students. In addition, of course, we have goals. The students need to understand the goals and align it to what our expectations are for the assessments. UDL does a wonderful idea of that. Of course, we'd want to make sure that we are doing that for both our distance student and our face-to-face student. Why wouldn't we want to use video for that in terms of making sure they understand the goal, explain the goal, explain the assessment, do a crosswalk for them, make the connection, offer visual supports along the way. This presentation here does a good job of illustrating that at your leisure. But in addition, there are ways of instruction that we know video can be powerful for as well. So for example, number 3, explicit instruction. Anita Archer gives us an overview of explicit instruction. It's an evidence-based practice. And oh my goodness, video is just phenomenal as an explicit instruction connection. We can do wonderful explicit instruction through video for our face-to-face students, as well as those students at home. Embed it in the LMS, make it available to the student and the adult at the home to further illustrate, further support, to rinse and repeat when necessary. Of course, our visual organizers, there's a hyperlink to how visual organizers can really help struggling learners. It's a step-by-step, not only the evidence, but what we need to do. Take a look at that at your leisure, but those are things we could do in addition to the video we create or embedded in the video we create to be able to foster what we need to do face-to-face, as well as what might be necessary virtually. This is not rocket science, but it's that alignment that, of course, video would be really helpful. It aligns with the way we're redesigning. And of course, it then meaningfully plans for those disruptions that are going to happen, as we already know from reality. Now, with video overall, remember it very much aligns with the UDL framework. There's a number of different resources here. These are all hyperlinked to talk about that use, okay? In addition, there was something created by myself and some colleagues. They're still available right at the beginning of COVID. They're still very relevant of taking the UDL practices and align it with digital technologies to plan not only for face-to-face, but also for the virtual environment. That's a hyperlink there. Everything from representation, action, expression, demonstration, okay? Or excuse me, engagement, all right? In addition, when you're thinking about video, I don't have enough time for this, but I want to reinforce it. When we're thinking about video for the students that we're using, so I just emphasize the fact that I'm going to do a lot of this video creation, and I'm going to make sure it's residing in my LMS. And by the way, folks, I have been doing this since COVID as well. I'm coming back to the same classes now, a year later, seeing the video I created, and I'm using that video again. It's still very relevant. The directions didn't change. The step-by-step instruction for an instructional method did not change. I got older in terms of the video I created, but otherwise it's still very, very relevant. So the investment of time is going to pay off because I'm going to continue using this over time on certain things. Now, I'm sorry, I have this speech to text. What do I have this here for? Students, of course, are creating video, right? They're creating video to demonstrate their knowledge, to be able to share what they know. Yeah, but they're not just simply going to create video. As we've talked about in the past, and Katie Novak has emphasized from a UDL perspective, we're going to allow them to have multiple options to be able to get ready for that video. So they're going to draft some ideas, and they may do drafting with speech to text, with co-writer or word prediction, with interactive graphic organizers, with interactive whiteboards. So they'll use other digital tools at home or face-to-face to further facilitate getting ready for those presentations or those videos, or maybe they'll create storyboards with graphic organizers. Those tools are available to them to be able to then organize, draft, get their ideas together, brainstorm. And then, of course, at the end of the day, they'll have scripted it out for a video that then they want to share with us. Now, how much they use it, how significant this needs to be, that goes by content, that goes by grade level, that goes by our expectations with them. But don't forget about that. And this is something we'd want to do face-to-face or virtual. And of course, we can do both depending upon the individual. This is what they would need. All right. Now, of course, I mentioned video modeling. I can't leave this emphasis in using video as a primary idea of being able to plan in a meaningful way for what's happening face-to-face. If it has to go online or vice versa, can't say that enough. I can't leave this without mentioning video modeling. Here's a hyperlink to a video that walks us through video modeling in 4 different components. Video modeling is evidence-based. It's powerful for all our individuals. It goes beyond social skills, folks. It gets into adaptive skill development. It gets into functional skill development. It gets into primary elements of literacy in terms of the video modeling, what we want to facilitate. And of course, video modeling itself can be used by individuals to demonstrate what they know. All right, so let's keep on moving here. Back to these questions again. Think about it. How are we leveraging when students are unable to attend in person? I just emphasize the fact that if we plan and redesign in a purposeful manner using technology like video for our instructions, for our directions, for some of our experiences, for some of our instruction, and for some of the students to actually demonstrate what they know, we're able to do this to extend beyond the face-to-face class environment, which they can be used for, into the virtual environment as well. But there's more, as David mentioned. To me, in addition to those questions, in addition to the video, thinking about the grade and content level instruction, and thinking particularly about the goals tied to assessment, let's think about assessment for a moment, all right? And so with that in mind, of course, we're going to think about progress monitoring because that's what we're doing, or curriculum-based measurements. That's what we're doing for our IP goals and benchmarks. Of course, we're doing this face-to-face regardless, but I would be amazed if some of us are not using some tools that have, if not life-altering, they've significantly changed the way that you've been able to support the child that you're working with, the professional team you're working with, as well as the adults in the home in terms of information. The pandemic has required us to go with some technologies. Some of them are big changers. And so I want to reinforce that are relevant to face-to-face, but also online. Of course, one of the primary mechanisms would be within that formative assessment component. It's going to allow us to progress monitoring. It's going to allow us to get a lot of this data. Now, data, we've had data walls in the past. Many of us actually probably continue to use data walls, but there's a lot of different data dashboards now. If you visited with us in the past, I've emphasized these, that our digital tools are providing, if not for free, like in Google Forms, they're part of our content management system that the districts are already paying for, so they're free that way, and they're tied to the instruction we're providing. So to me, face-to-face or virtual, how are we using this data to facilitate the level of independent work we want them to do, to allow the individuals to be further engaged and knowledgeable, and to also direct and give the pathway to that instruction, which would be more personalized, which again is an approach that was used face-to-face and online prior to the pandemic, and it's been used through the pandemic. So data walks are critical. Many of us have data walls, but in terms of using data walks, there's dashboard systems that are available to us, be it the UPAR and the reading. Here's another video that teachers talk about how they're doing it in the writing process, but they're using a dashboard system, be it the dashboard system in IXL, be it in Google Forms, be it in a writing program that you're using. The student's data is being collected, and there it is. It's there. It's automatically scored. It's there waiting for you. Some of you are doing this through more traditional means in terms of systems that you guys have accessed in the National Intensive Interventions system, in terms of everything from CBMs for math, reading, writing, but or other programs, again, that we have through our learning management system or through the systems we're using. Automatically provides the data, it dashboards it for us depending upon how mature it is, and now what are we going to do with it? For the individual, they better understand what they need to do, be it face-to-face or fully online, and for us the same. For the online student, and for us with the student online, we'll know what they did, we'll know how well they did, we'll know where potential some of those challenges are, etc., depending upon the system we use. And of course, it allows us with the goals, we can make the goals as transparent as possible to align it to the formative assessment we're providing, so the students see the connection between what we're expecting, how we're assessing it, and how they're doing. And that's all available, click, 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 with many of the tools. Now, of course, from a formative assessment perspective, we can use things we do face-to-face and digitize some of those as well. We can digitize it from the beginning so that they're face-to-face, great. If they're not, it's available to them in a variety of different tools. And so everything from, there's a variety of classroom tools off of Google Classroom, there's Edulastic, there's Padlet, there's Kahoots, there's Quizlet, there's a variety of different things we can use to create these types of tools that, again, face-to-face or online, regardless, they'd be very relevant to use. So a variety of different resources. If you've been with us in the past, these are the same resources I've shared in the past. Everything from digital tips for formative assessments to ways to assess students in online. But many of these folks are the same thing, that if I'm working face-to-face and the students have their devices open, why wouldn't I not use that for the dashboard, for the automatic scoring, for the quick access to the information, that then I can do data walks with students, whether they're face-to-face or fully online, temporarily, permanently, whatever it may be. All right, so those are available for you. But back to the Universal Design for Learning framework, we can't not think about that when it comes to assessment, but because it gives us lots of different ways, including things like self-assessing, right? So UDL is trying to develop those self-regulation skills, including self-assessment, which is an evidence-based practice. Here's a link to take you to walking through step by step about how to do that. But of course, if we're going to do it, we're going to use a variety of different tools to do it, including video and other things, as well as we're going to use a rubric, which will allow us to quantify what they're doing across different options, right? They can do a presentation, they can do an audio file, they can do a video file, they can do a traditional test. All those things then will allow us to score it quantitatively and then potentially using other digital technologies to put it into a dashboard for us to understand, for us to do data walks with students, regardless face-to-face or fully online. Okay. There's a lot of resources here. They're linked off of the Google presentation. These are all hyperlinked. Either the image is hyperlinked or these are hyperlinked. My emails is on the first slide. I will not give us all a headache by going all the way back to the first slide, but hopefully a few of these ideas, yes, they're somewhat simple, but I also believe they're fairly powerful when utilized and when we plan for, in a way, the student, regardless of where they're going to be, we're going to use these tools and hopefully we're going to use them well. So hopefully that was helpful. And I'm going to bring it back over to Sarah or Ethan, and I'll stop sharing.